favorite budget-friendly APS-C lenses for the Sony A6300 and the A6000 series in general. The Sigma 16mm f1.4, the Sigma 30mm f1.4, the Sony 50mm f1.8. So now let's get into the pros and cons of each of them, and more importantly, what scenarios or what situations I would recommend each of them for. Starting off with the Sigma 16mm, this is probably the most expensive lens on the list, and trust me, it is worth every kobo. It's sharp, it's clean, and the build quality is really good. You hold this thing in your hand and you know that you have spent money. So that wide focal length makes it really good for gimbal work in filming spaces and architecture, landscapes, and the likes of it. It's also a 1.4 lens, which means it's really good in low light situations. So if you're having to film the interior of a building and there's not that much light, you can wire this thing up to about 1.4. But like I said, it's not the cheapest, and if you find that perhaps it's too heavy for your wallet right now, I mean, this was the last lens I bought and it took me a while before I bought this one. A cheaper alternative would actually be the Sony 16mm f2.8. It's cheaper. I haven't used it personally, but it's been recommended that that is a good alternative to the 16. The Sigma 30mm f1.4. I love this focal length because it's a very cinematic focal length. It's not 50mm per se, it's just under, and that puts it in a very unique position whereby it's wide enough that you can take some steps back and have a wide shot, and then you can still go close enough to actually get a portrait-sized shot without there being any distortion or anything. So it's a very unique focal length, and I would recommend, after your kit lens, the next lens you should get for yourself should be the 30mm f1.4. Just like the Sigma 16mm, it's a 1.4 lens, so it's really good in low light situations. It's very sharp. Believe me, it's very sharp. When I bought this lens and shot some footage for my mentor, when he saw the footage, he actually thought that I was using a completely different camera. That's the amount of difference that just this lens makes, especially when you're coming from the kit lens. You will be amazed what this lens can do. Now, does it mean that it is perfect? No. It tends to struggle with autofocus, especially when filming in maybe S-Log2 or S-Log3. Now, it's not a consistent problem. It's just once in a while that it tends to struggle. I would say probably 8 to 10% of a shoot that I would have to retake the shot because the focus, it had problem focusing. But aside that, the lens is gold, man. And it's also not as expensive as the 16, so yeah, you should definitely get one for yourself. Thirdly, we have the Sony 50mm. Now, even though this is the cheapest of all the lenses that I've mentioned, it actually has something that the other lenses don't, and that is it's a full frame lens. So if in future you decide to upgrade from an APS-C Sony camera to a full frame camera, this lens will still have you covered. It's equally sharp with lots of details. I mean, it's 50mm combined with the fact that it's an APS-C sensor, so it gives you around that 70 to 75mm, which is really nice. You get some really good compression, especially when you're trying to get close-up shots, portrait shots. You get really good compression of the background, and you get some really good compression even on your subject's faces. The not so good thing about it is, one, I don't really like the focus ring. Even the build quality can tend to feel a bit plastic, but that's not the issue. The focus ring is not the best. So if you are having to shoot and you need to do manual focusing, you might not really enjoy this lens, but if you leave it on autofocus, it does an excellent job. And then compared to the other Sigma lenses that I mentioned, this lens has more contrast. You know, straight out of the camera, it has more contrast compared to the Sigma lenses. Bear that in mind so that when you find that the shots that you used, the 50mm, seems to be looking a bit different from those, just have that in mind that this lens gives a little bit more contrast, and with that contrast comes some bit of color and saturation as well. So that's something that you would have to work out and fix in the edit. If you need help in learning how to color correct and color grade, you can watch this of my video. It's a series of trainings where taking people through color grading and teaching color grading and color correction and all of that. So it will be very beneficial for you. So now that you have a good set of lenses, I think it's now important for you to make sure that your camera is able to capture the best image from these lenses. So check out my other video where I talk about some of the settings and how to set your camera, specifically the Sony A6300, but the same thing applies to the entire A6000 series, whether it's an A6000 camera or whether it's the A6700 camera. All right, so just go watch that video to make sure that the settings on your camera are optimized for the best quality possible, and then combine that with some really good prime lenses and you will get some really amazing shots.